Let me ask you a question that might make you uncomfortable. Why do some people gain access to money, influence, and power almost effortlessly, while others work harder, study more, behave better, and still remain invisible? Why do certain individuals get invited into rooms where real decisions are made, while others are kept outside, politely acknowledged, and quietly ignored? The answer is not talent, it is not intelligence, and it is definitely not fairness. The truth is simpler and far more dangerous. In this world, you don't get what you deserve. You get what you are allowed to access. And access is never granted randomly. Niccolò Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He didn't write about motivation. He didn't write about morality. He wrote about reality, about how power actually works when no one is watching. And if you want to understand why the elite choose some people and discard others, you must first accept one brutal truth. The powerful do not look for friends. They look for stability, control, and advantage. Most people make the same fatal mistake when they approach influence. They try to be liked. They try to be helpful. They try to show enthusiasm, loyalty, respect. And in doing so, they immediately place themselves below. The moment you seek approval from power, you confirm its dominance over you. Machiavelli warned that those who openly submit can never be treated as equals. Power does not respect admiration. It tolerates usefulness, and only temporarily. Now pause for a moment and think honestly. How many times have you seen average, unimpressive people rise quickly simply because they were inside? And how many capable, intelligent individuals stayed stuck outside, watching opportunities pass them by? This is not coincidence. It is structure. Power does not evaluate essence. It evaluates position. And the most dangerous thing you can do is approach the powerful from a position of need.
Here is where most people make this second mistake. Once they realize this, they try to compensate. They become louder, more assertive, more dominant. They imitate confidence. But Machiavelli warned against this too. Nothing irritates real power more than fake power. The elite have seen this performance thousands of times. They recognize it instantly. Strength that needs to announce itself is weakness. The people who are allowed close are not the loudest. They are the calmest, dangerously calm. Because calm signals something rare, inner control. And inner control is far more threatening than aggression. The elite do not seek admiration. They seek equilibrium. Someone who does not chase, does not beg, does not fear being excluded. Because fear of loss is the clearest sign of dependence, and dependence makes you predictable. Machiavelli wrote that people respect those who can walk away, because the ability to leave is power. This is why, in elite circles,
nothing important is said directly. They observe how you behave when nothing is promised, how you handle silence, how you sit inside uncertainty, how you react when attention is withdrawn. If you rush, if you over-explain, if you seek reassurance, the door quietly closes. Here is the paradox most people never understand. To be invited inside, you must be willing to remain outside. Desire exposes weakness. Restraint creates gravity. If you stay until the end of this video, you will understand how the elite test people without saying a word. What signals you send, even in silence, and what truly makes someone one of us, even without status, money, or connections. This knowledge is not comfortable. It destroys illusions, but it separates those who circle the gates forever from those who are eventually let through. There is something the powerful almost never explain, but they test relentlessly. They are not looking for your ideas. They are not looking for your energy. They are not looking for your ambition.
They are watching how you behave when no one tells you what to do. Machiavelli understood this clearly. He wrote that a man reveals his true nature not when he is guided, but when he is left in uncertainty. Uncertainty is the testing ground. Most people collapse inside it. They become restless. They seek direction. They ask too many questions. They rush to prove usefulness. They try to earn relevance. And in doing so, they reveal dependence. Dependence is dangerous to power. A dependent person is unstable. He panics under pressure. He overreacts. He betrays not out of malice, but out of fear. That is why the elite value composure more than initiative. Calmness is not passivity. It is dominance over oneself. If nothing is promised to you and you remain centered, you immediately separate yourself from the majority. When you are ignored and you do not chase, you are noticed. When silence stretches and you do not fill it, you gain weight in the room. Machiavelli warned that the man who reacts too quickly hands control to others. Reaction is exposure. Stillness is concealment. This is where many fail. They believe value must be demonstrated early. They think usefulness creates access. But from the perspective of power, early usefulness looks like negotiation from below. It signals need. Machiavelli wrote that gifts offered by the weak humiliate rather than bind, while gifts offered by equals create alliances. Position matters more than effort. True strategy does not announce value. It lets value reveal itself naturally. You do not list your capabilities. You do not explain your potential. You behave as if you already have options, even if you don't yet. This creates tension, and tension attracts attention. The elite are not drawn to enthusiasm. They are drawn to self-containment, because self-containment suggests independence, and independence is rare. Another mistake people make is misunderstanding confidence. Confidence is not certainty. It is emotional neutrality. When someone speaks near power with hidden urgency, hidden hunger, hidden expectation, It is felt immediately. Not heard, felt. Machiavelli understood that men trust those who do not need their trust. Paradoxical, but absolute. When you do not need approval, approval begins to form. When you do not need access, access is considered. When you do not fear exclusion, exclusion loses leverage. But passing this stage only brings you deeper. Once you have demonstrated composure, the next test begins. It is more subtle and more dangerous, because now they test your depth. They will provoke you quietly. They may underestimate you, interrupt you, delay responses, withhold clarity, not to insult you, but to see if you fracture. Most people interpret this emotionally. They defend themselves, correct assumptions, explain intentions, and in doing so, they expose ego. Machiavelli wrote that the first man to lose control loses position. Justification is submission. Defense is disclosure. The disciplined man remains intact. If interrupted, he does not reclaim space. If underestimated, he does not correct perception. If delayed, he does not accelerate. He allows others to reveal themselves, and something important happens. The observer becomes the observed. Those who cannot tolerate silence begin to talk. They explain too much. They reveal motivations, and the balance quietly shifts. But this is still not trust, not yet, because trust in elite circles is not built on warmth. It is built on predictability under stress, and that is tested next. Once composure is established, the elite shift to a deeper evaluation. They stop measuring intelligence. They stop measuring competence. They begin measuring reliability. Machiavelli understood something most people refuse to accept. Talent is impressive, but stability is essential. A brilliant man who cannot be predicted under pressure is more dangerous than useful. Power does not fear ignorance, it fears volatility. So the next test is loyalty, but not the kind people expect. Loyalty is not agreement. It is not obedience. It is not praise. Loyalty is behavior under temptation. You will be placed in situations where you could gain by destabilizing others. You may witness mistakes, weaknesses, private failures. You may have the opportunity to elevate yourself by quietly lowering someone else. Most people take it. They believe intelligence means exploiting openings. They believe advantage must be seized immediately. Machiavelli warned against this instinct. He wrote that the man who advances by undermining structure becomes an enemy of the system itself, and power never protects its enemies. The elite are not looking for the cleverest player. They are looking for the safest one, someone who does not create friction, someone who does not introduce instability, someone who does not gain at the expense of cohesion, because cohesion preserves control. Another silent test follows: confidentiality. You will be exposed to information you are not meant to repeat, not explicitly, not formally, just enough to see what you do with it. Most people fail here without realizing it. They mention it casually. They hint. They signal that they know things. They try to convert access into status, and the door closes. Machiavelli was ruthless on this point. A man who cannot guard information cannot be trusted with power. Silence is not emptiness. It is discipline. If you can carry information without displaying it, you become rare. If you can know without signaling knowledge, you become valuable. At this stage, something subtle changes. People begin to consult you, not because you dominate, not because you insist, but because you are steady. Your presence does not increase tension, it reduces it. Your reactions are measured. Your responses are minimal. Your emotions are contained. This is when influence begins. Not the kind that announces itself, but the kind that shapes outcomes quietly. However, this is also where many fall, because acceptance creates illusion. The illusion that you are now safe, that you belong, that you can relax. Machiavelli warned that perceived security is more dangerous than open hostility. The moment a man believes his position is permanent, he becomes careless. He speaks more freely. He signals ambition. He forgets restraint. And power notices immediately. At this level, mistakes are not corrected. They are recorded. Because proximity to power demands higher discipline, not less. The elite are not sentimental. They do not remove people dramatically. They wait. They allow patterns to form, and when the pattern becomes clear, they adjust without explanation. That is why survival near power requires constant awareness, not paranoia, awareness. You must never confuse access with ownership. You are allowed inside, conditionally. Machiavelli wrote that favor is unstable by nature. Only independence stabilizes position, which leads to the most important realization so far. To remain inside, you must always be capable of leaving. And this is where the next test begins. The most dangerous moment near power is the moment you feel secure. Security creates softness. Softness creates mistakes. Machiavelli warned that power is never maintained by trust alone, only by constant balance. The elite do not remove people abruptly. They give them space to reveal themselves. Comfort is the trap. Once a person believes they are inside, their behavior changes. They speak more. They joke more freely. They express opinions that were once restrained. They begin to act as if their presence is guaranteed. This is when observation intensifies. Power watches what you do when you believe no one is watching. The next test
is boundaries. You may be given more access, more information, more informal authority, not as a reward, but as a measurement. Most people expand too fast. They speak on behalf of others. They imply influence they were never granted.
They make decisions they were not asked to make. This is perceived as intrusion. Machiavelli understood that the strongest allies are those who never forget their position, even when trusted. True discipline is self-imposed. Those who restrain themselves appear stronger than those who reach outward. Another test follows, and it is one few survive: unrecognized contribution. You may solve a problem and receive no credit. You may stabilize a situation and watch recognition go elsewhere. You may act correctly and be met with silence. This is intentional. Power is watching whether you act for position or for validation. Those who seek recognition are dependent on it. Machiavelli was clear: the man who demands reward reveals weakness. In elite structures, rewards are given to those who can function without them. If you remain composed when unnoticed, your value multiplies, because most people only work when observed. Now comes the most revealing test of all, the exit test. You may be passed over, delayed, ignored at a critical moment, and power watches carefully. Do you negotiate emotionally? Do you pressure? Do you display resentment? Do you threaten departure? Or do you remain calm and continue your path independently? Machiavelli wrote that a man who fears losing favor has already lost power. The ability to leave quietly, without bitterness, without explanation, without warning, is deeply unsettling, because it signals freedom. Those who are not attached cannot be controlled. And here lies the final paradox of access. You are not retained by needing to stay. You are retained when staying is optional. When power senses that you do not depend on it, it begins to depend on you. And at this point, the game changes again, because now the question is no longer how to stay inside. The question becomes how to remain sovereign. There comes a point where proximity to power is no longer enough. At this level, your position depends too much on personalities, moods, and shifting alliances. Machiavelli warned that any man who relies solely on the favor of others builds his strength on unstable ground. True power begins when your influence survives without permission. This is the transition from participant to independent force. Most people never make it. They remain valuable but replaceable, trusted but dependent, close but fragile, because they confuse relationships with leverage. Relationships feel warm, leverage feels cold, and power always chooses cold. Leverage is anything that gives you influence without requiring explanation, a skill that is rare, access to a critical process, control over information flow, the ability to solve problems when chaos appears. Machiavelli understood this clearly. Power respects necessity. If your presence prevents loss, your absence becomes dangerous. That is the shift. You stop being included. You start being accounted for. At this stage, your behavior changes again. You speak less, not because you are cautious, but because words expose structure. Every sentence reveals alignment. Every opinion creates friction. Silence preserves ambiguity. Ambiguity preserves control. The elite fear what they cannot fully map. Machiavelli wrote that uncertainty is often more effective than force. When people do not know how far your reach extends, they assume the worst. This is not intimidation, it is positioning. Another illusion must be destroyed here, the illusion of permanence. Even those who reach this level fall when they believe the game is over. Machiavelli warned relentlessly about fortune. He wrote that fortune governs half of all outcomes, and discipline must govern the rest. Discipline means flexibility. You never anchor your power to a single role, a single alliance, a single structure. You maintain exits. You cultivate parallel paths, independent reputation, transferable influence, not visibly, quietly. A man who can change terrain cannot be trapped. This is why the strongest figures appear almost detached. They are present, but never entangled. They participate, but never cling. Their calm is not confidence, it is preparedness. At this level, people begin to adjust around you. They consult before acting. They hesitate before opposing. They account for your reaction, not because you demand it, but because your position is stable. Stability is rare, and rarity creates gravity. But one final step remains, the most difficult one. If everything you've heard were reduced to a single truth, it would be this: power is not something you are given. Power is something that cannot be taken from you. Machiavelli understood this long before modern institutions, corporations, and financial systems existed. He watched men rise and fall. He saw loud leaders collapse under arrogance, and quiet figures survive chaos because they remained mobile. You do not build influence to dominate others. You build it so you never have to depend on them. Freedom, in its most practical form, is the ability to act when others hesitate. They hesitate because of fear. Fear of losing status. Fear of losing access, fear of losing approval, fear of losing position. You are no longer trapped there. You stop asking for entry. You stop seeking permission. You stop explaining your value. Instead, you become a point of gravity. You no longer wait to be invited. You create conditions where excluding you becomes irrational. You do not ask for opportunities, you produce outcomes. You do not defend your importance, you make it self-evident through consequences. Machiavelli wrote that a leader's true strength is revealed not in victory, but in instability. If you remain calm when others panic, silent when others justify, capable of leaving when others cling, you become dangerous. Not to individuals, to systems. Because systems fear those who do not depend on their rules. And now, be honest with yourself. If you stayed until this moment, if you listened until the end, you are not like most people. Most leave early. They want comfort, motivation, easy answers. You stayed. That means you recognize structure where others chase illusion. Machiavelli never promised happiness. He offered clarity, and clarity is always the beginning of power. Remember this: you do not need to be liked. You do not need to explain yourself. You do not need to be comfortable. You need to be centered, capable, internally free. Everything else is secondary. Now, one final step. If this video gave you clarity, if you felt it was not motivation but understanding, subscribe to this channel, not out of habit, but because you recognize how rare this kind of knowledge is. Like this video, not for the algorithm, but as an internal commitment to choose awareness over comfort. And do one more thing. Send this video to one person, not to a group, not to a chat. One person you respect, one person close to you, someone you want to share something genuinely valuable with. Because real power is not built in crowds, but in precise alliances. If you are here, you are ready. Move calmly. Build quietly. Let results speak. This is the path of Machiavelli.